L'avenir means the future in French. And there's this property created by a French-speaking Mauritian businessman is now in the hand of French people. And L'Avenir carries its name very well because they are focusing on what might be the future of South Africa, which is Chenin Blanc and Pinotage. And Chenin Blanc is clearly the best future for our country. I think so. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you're far more open-minded than I am. But the Chenin Blanc Provenance 2020 is a very interesting and with a strong identity Chenin Blanc. What do you have in your glass, Kathy?
Okay, we can discuss later the future of Chenin Blanc in South Africa.
Okay.
I happen to agree, but my reasons might be different.
I'm so happy to be right.
Okay, so wine tasting and wine identification is not always easy. And this wine, I have to admit, threw me when I had a little bit of a nose, firstly. I get lemon on the nose, and so immediately my adult brain thought potentially Chardonnay, but it's not really speaking to me of that much Chardonnay on the nose. And when I tasted it as well, I also found some lemon on the finish. Thought, potentially still Chardonnay, but on going back to it and letting it open up in the glass, I found that good terracotta, slightly acacia bit on the nose, and then some white peaches came to the fore on the nose and also on the palate. But then I really focused on the palate, and I found that it had a lovely, more malic acidity, and also it didn't have that weight or that density, you know, that viscosity that Chardonnay always seems to give you, whether it's wooded or unwooded, whether it's a high 14.5% alcohol or whether it's a 12.5% alcohol. Chardonnay just always has that lovely palate weight. And this for me, although it has got density on the palate, had a lighter palate weight. And so I veered away from Chardonnay and thought this could definitely be Chenin in my glass, especially with the malic acid.
That's always the beauty of Chenin Blanc. It can come under so many shapes and really reflects both the terroir and the winemaking skill, and as well the warmth of the place it's growing and its subsoil. We are on Stellenbosch. We are just off the limit of Simonsburg on a more gentle slopes. But what I agree, it's not the typical Chenin Blanc that's screaming green apple, and but what I found on that wine is I had some flowers on the nose, almost like, I'm sorry to talk about my grandmother. She used to have a iris perfume, this iris flower perfume.
Oh, really?
And yes, on the finish, you got the zingy acidity. I mean, it's a lot packed on the middle palate. There's a lot of freshness on the middle palate, but you have this almost lemony finish, almost zesty finish, which, you know, it's a strong identity. Some of the wine you might not identify either classic Chenin, but not on the first sight. But when you think twice and you eliminate, it's a very well-built wine, and only Chenin could give this balance of middle palate, this zingy acidity. As you said, the wine is very dry. There's no creaminess on the middle palate. And yes, these citrusy hints, both at the end and at the beginning, can be confusing, but they're very enjoyable.
But they're very enjoyable. I think the wine is pretty smart, but I think the other thing that automatically makes people think Chardonnay is the oak on the wine. Because the oak it's not there in vanilla, it's there more in some almonds, some honey. And you can pick it up. And we just have this knee-jerk reaction whenever we pick up oak on a white, is to think Chardonnay, because that's what we've been conditioned to. Or at least people of my era.
We are not conditioned, we are free drinkers.
Yeah. But it's what people of my era have come to expect, because that's what I grew up with. But so that's automatic. That's the mistake that you can be lulled into when you're doing a tasting blind, is if it's got oak, you almost start convincing yourself that it should be Chardonnay, whereas you have to then just take that step back and really unpack the wine and ask yourself, what is the acidity? What does the acidity feel like to me on the wine? How does the palate feel? Is it a Chardonnay? Is it a real Chardonnay feel, or is it something else similar to the acidity? Is it a Chardonnay acidity, or is it a malic acidity, or acidity of something else? And I think that's the lesson that this wine teaches us, aside from the fact that it's actually a really lovely wine.
Yes, but I think now it's warming up in the glass as well. You can see it was very much focusing on the middle palate, and now you gain some length, and you feel much more of this green apple crispiness on the finish. It's like the lemon is fading slowly, and you go back to its DNA, its Chenin DNA.
It's Chenin DNA, and you're also getting that apple skin on the finish, which is definitely Chenin.
Very smart wine,
Lovely
very unusual,
wine.
strong identity, but clearly one of the variation of Chenin Blanc in South Africa. Is it the future? Cassie will talk about that another time. Thank you.